Let him in.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Longfellow Books virtually and the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance tonight for Craig Grossi talking about his new book, Second Chances, which is about his experience meeting the men at Maine State Prison who are working to train service dogs for disabled veterans. Excuse me, I'll put up the link to purchase Craig's book in the chat. And also as the conversation goes on this evening, please feel free to post questions that you have for Craig in the chat. And Gibson from MWPA will be sort of handling those later on in the evening. So raised in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C., Craig Grossi is a Marine Corps veteran, recipient of the Purple Heart, and a Georgetown University graduate. Fred, beside him on the couch, is the dog he met while stationed in Afghanistan. And with some proper scheming and a lot of help, Craig was able to send Fred home to his family while he completed his tour. On the speaking tour following his first book, Craig and Fred, he ended up at the Maine State Prison. When not in prison, I should clarify, sorry. I had my vaccine yesterday. I'm a little fuzzy. But his speaking tour brought him to the Maine State Prison. And when he's not traveling with Fred, he also devotes his time to veteran organizations, including the USA Warriors Ice Hockey Program and other nonprofits that benefit dogs and veterans. And he now lives in Maine with his partner, Nora, Fred, and their other dog, Ruby, who is also there on the couch. Monica Wood, also a graduate of Georgetown University, is a novelist, memoirist, and playwright. Her most recent novel, One in a Million Boy, has been published in 22 languages in 30 countries and won the 2017 Nautilus Award and the New England Society Book Award. She's also the author of When We Were the Kennedys, an Oprah Magazine summer reading pick, and the winner of both the May Sarton Memoir Award and the 2016 Maine Literary Award. Ernie's Arc, which was recently reissued, was excerpted on NPR's Selected Shorts and selected by several towns and cities as their One Book, One Community read. Monica also has experience teaching writing to incarcerated individuals. So this conversation is going to be really great, and I'm just going to turn it right over to them. So take it away, Monica.
All right, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. I don't see anyone, but maybe that's just, I'm not going to see anybody. Okay, that's fine. All right, well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Craig and Fred. And I do not see another dog there. Is it so small that oh, okay. Oh, a little one. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a pillow.
Oh, how sweet. Well, thank you so much for joining all of us. And you live in Maine, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
You're in, okay, so you're a Mainer as well right now. Welcome. So I was so interested in this book. I read your first one as well about how you acquired Fred, the irrepressible Fred right there, sleeping away. And I loved that one. And I was just so tickled when Lucinda asked me if I would be the, interviewer for this thing. I thought, yes, sign me up. Oh my gosh, this sounds great. So I read the book today and I was completely immersed in it. And so much of it, because I have also done work like this, oh my gosh, it resonated so much with me. So I just want to say by way of introduction and my first question to you is, so 2 years ago, you began a writing class with some of the incarcerated men at the Maine State Prison, a small group of men, experience that affected you profoundly and which you write about in this book. But the writing class part is something you kind of backed into because you were introduced to the prison by way of your first book, and you were invited to speak to some men who were in the veterans pod, and maybe you can explain to people what that means. And they were selected to be trainers, socializers and trainers for the puppy program, which is for dogs go into the prison, they get a trainer and they are trained, but they are incarcerated men, and they train the dogs who then go to be assistance dogs or service dogs to veterans, which is just a beautiful idea. And I just want to read a little thing you wrote about that experience. You say, but for the guys at the Maine State, meaning the prison, training the puppies meant forging an immense bond that would then have to be broken. They knew it going in, and I just hoped The knowledge that they were really making a difference in a veteran's life was enough to make it worthwhile. It was a truly selfless act that they were prepared to bond with a dog and then sever that bond for the benefit of somebody else. It was extraordinary to me. Dogs teach us a lot of things, but one that we might not appreciate is the ability to love without fear or despite fear. And that is exceptionally courageous. It's a beautiful passage. And the connection to the puppy program is so obvious because that's what you're writing about, and it's just clear that they know going in what they're doing and that it is a very brave thing. But as you continue to write about the writing class that came from this, I thought, you could have written that about your writing class as well. There was some very strong bonds that appear in there, and there's a lot of gutsy stuff that comes out through their writing, and it really takes something to share something of your real self in a prison, which is designed to do exactly the opposite. So I wondered if you could, it's kind of a big question to start with, but just talk about how those two programs kind of resonated in that sense for you.
Yeah, so thank you. That's a massive compliment from you that you were drawn to that particular passage of the book and to the book itself. And so thank you for that, and thank you to everybody for coming tonight. And I think that's a really great question to think about the two programs and like how they had pretty profound similarities. For me, the connection I made to writing came from just trying to find a real purpose to be up there. I was just genuinely just drawn to spending time in Maine State Prison and with those guys in particular, and I just wanted to create, like, to give something to them with through my time, and so the writing was kind of what I had at the time, and still do. I really realized I got a lot out of writing my first book, and it really made me reflect on the bond and the story of Fred, and I remembered so much more, and I was grateful for so much, the good and the bad, that I really found a lot of purpose in the writing process. And so I thought I could give that to these guys, but at the same time, the dogs and the dog program for them were doing what Fred has done and had done for me in Afghanistan. And so it was like almost like two parallel things happening that were things that I had experienced already, writing and bonding with the dog. And I was really just kind of in between them, just like in the glow of these two really beautiful kind of programs. One of which I created, one that was existed already. And so there's a lot to unpack. The therapeutic and personal growth and everything that it takes to train a dog, and then on the writing side, it's the same thing. It's everything that it takes to dig deep and to share something about yourself under the best of circumstances, let alone inside a place like that, which, as you said, is designed to shut everybody down and mentally, like, not just physically lock people away, but really mentally put up walls, just as a means of survival.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that people, when people do come to programs like this inside, I think what they begin to know we can say, well, you can't imprison my mind, and which is, I guess, true, but you kind of can.
Yeah.
And I think for the men, I feel like the men especially, because women, I think, are more natural sharers. Although, in a prison, it's not easy, but I'm thinking, wow, with male prisoners, that I think it's a bigger hurdle, but I think because of your unique experiences, and also having, the dogs as, they make such a beautiful cushion between one thing and another.
Mhm.
So I wondered if you could maybe tell people who haven't read the book exactly how this works, like when you spend a day, and because you seem to do it all on one day, which I would find exhausting, I think, but you go in for the puppies in the morning and then you take a break and then you come back and do your writing class. I don't think it ever says how long the writing classes are. Are they like 2 hours or?
They would end up being like 3 hours.
Okay, so it wasn't a set thing.
Oh yeah, we would it would depend on the staff and how much time, but
Mhm,
typically typically they would be around 3 hours. And,
mhm,
they
okay.
would fly. They would fly right by.
Yeah.
It was quite a day, and I loved it. It was it I felt it was kind of important um to do it all in one day, because a lot of the times what the guys were writing about was what had taken place in the puppy class,
Yeah.
or just like it just seemed like it fit to kind of do it
Mhm,
all in one day. And I was driving, 2 hours
right.
from where we were living at the time to get up there. So it was like, might as well just. So yeah, I would show up in the morning and kind of just be a fly on the wall for the puppy classes, and really observe the progress and the frustrations and the ups and downs, of that process. And it was really, really neat to just, and I would just take notes, and then yeah, I'd go out and grab some lunch, and then be right back in there in the afternoon for the writing class. And it was really, really fun. Like, I just had a great time. I very quickly just became some real camaraderie, some
Mhm.
real genuine connections with those guys. And it's still happening. We're doing it via Zoom. A lot of the same guys, with a lot of new guys too. So yeah, it's really incredible.
I think that's great. When you were doing it in person, were you in the same place each time, or did they move you around? Or one of the problems we had is we were just kind of never in the same place.
Mm.
It was that was a little bit tough.
Yeah,
Did they give you a designated spot or?
yeah. Yeah, I was lucky, I guess. Yeah, because we had a classroom inside the pod, inside the veterans pod.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so it's for everybody that's not familiar with.
Oh,
I think um, what people are more familiar with in terms of just from movies and stuff, they call them cell blocks,
yeah.
movies. But in modern prisons, they call them pods, and it's essentially a big housing unit. And in Maine State Prison, they have, and probably every prison, they have different designations in terms of the security risks of certain people inside each one, and there's different incentive levels to each pod. And one of the ones at Maine State Prison is designated specifically for people who have served in the military. You have to kind of earn your spot in that pod through behavior and work and stuff like that. So it's a really special place. It's lots of art and just a real kind of sense of calm within there, it was really, really special. I miss it. I miss going in there.
Yeah, I know it's hard to explain to people how, I mean, I always felt very happy inside. Of course,
Yeah.
we can leave anytime we want, so there's
Yeah.
a big difference, but I just felt one of the things that and I know why you didn't do this because it sounds like, they're so grateful for your presence, for one's presence.
Mhm.
Uh, and you don't want to write, oh, they just loved me so much and they just couldn't wait for it was the highlight of the week. But,
Yeah.
I don't think you can under describe what it means to be in there. And the veterans pod sounds pretty great as prisons go. I mean, but it's still prison and it's still, there's a lot of boredom and tedium. And I think just having something like this, any kind of thing, I did a book program, a book and writing program called Meet the Authors. And then I would have the authors who are all women friends of mine come in and meet with
That's
the women after we read the book. And then
wow.
they would spend a time with them. It was a really good program. Um, but they always said thank you. Always, always, always said thank you. And I began to feel like the most important thing I was doing was just showing up when I said I would. Like
Mhm.
that was the one most important thing I did
Absolutely.
because people have not shown up for them
Yeah.
for a really long time. And I think you should have just put a little bit more of that in there, but I understand why you didn't. But
Yeah.
it feels good, it feels good to have that gratitude.
It does, yeah. So what? And you taught writing too, right? What
I
was
did.
what was your approach to teaching writing?
My approach is it was much more regimented. So it was called Meet the Authors.
Mm.
And I had, it was 12, no, it was started out 10 weeks, but it ended, each one I did was supposed to be 12 weeks. Then it would be like, 13 weeks, 14 weeks. It kept going
Yeah.
until it kind of came to a natural conclusion. And then I would wait, 3 or 4 months and then do another round of it. But I picked 4 or 5 books. We didn't read all of every book, but some of them were nonfiction. Some were like lay science about brain chemistry, but it's a great book. It's called Quark. And the women loved this book because the author is Hannah Holmes. She's a wonderful, very bubbly person and writes science for lay people. And they're fascinating, very, very fun to read. And the women were really interested in that topic about how your brain works.
Yeah.
And we read short stories, we read poetry, and we did children's literature. And so I had an author from each of those genres come in. We'd spend, 2 or 3 weeks on something, and then we'd be writing in the genre that we were reading.
Mm.
So one of the best, I love also how you include their writing in it. There's a lot of writing from some of the men in your group. And one of the things we did, this was after one of the science books, and it was about, it was called The Well-Dressed Ape, a guide, a field guide to the human animal.
Mm.
And it was all about, how humans mate and make shelter. And, it was all a very scientific
Yeah.
view of the human. And this woman in my class wrote like a Wild Kingdom documentary style thing about waiting for chow.
Wow.
And how, they're all lining up for the watering, as if they're all lions and tigers and things. And it was so funny. And when we also did a reading for everybody, at the end, which was the best part. And I was so afraid that people would be mad, because she was describing them all as, animals, but in the most scientific way. And the place just cracked up. It was really funny. So that was one of the highlights for
Yeah,
me.
I love that. That's really cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, just it was, um, I would have liked to have done more, I think, creative kind of stuff like that. But I was just so impressed with where they took just a little bit of guidance from me,
Yeah.
and so it felt like that was kind of our sweet spot, was just like giving them a little bit and letting them, like kind of run with it. And it was poetry and songs and stories, so that was that. And yeah, it was really, I was so glad that some of the guys were open to me sharing some of their stuff in the.
Yeah,
the
they were. It sounds like it was just right for what they need at the time. You never know. And each class is a little bit different. Each group is a little different. And it's also a little hard when you lose some and then somebody else comes in and the kind of the group personality changes a little bit. And then you kind of alter. You have to do a lot of thinking on the fly, but it's exciting and challenging.
Did you have like a person that was always would always try to kind of take over?
Funny enough, I got very, very lucky that way. I mean, in my civilian classes, there's always one.
Yeah,
But
right.
I didn't have that. That can be tricky too, because you don't want to shut anything down. But yeah.
It would, yeah, that was tricky, but I kind of let them as a group, and then this one person, I would kind of just give them a little time in the beginning. That first, like, it was typically my first cup of prison coffee.
Yeah.
Give them that much and be like, all right, and I would say to myself as they're kind of gabbing with each other and complaining about, prison life and food and stuff like that. I'd be like, all right, once I get, down to the end of this cup, I'm going to be like, all right, so, and I never had to say it more than once.
Right. Yeah.
Always like, okay, yeah, let's do this, and they would kind of look at me and be like, all right, yeah, he's here. We could talk about this stuff all week. you
Yeah.
know, like Craig and Fred are here. Let's do
Yeah.
this. They would dive right in, and I was nervous. I think the thing I was most apprehensive about was having to give a lot of instruction,
Hmm.
because these are guys who are being told kind of constantly what they can and can't
Right.
do,
Yeah.
and I didn't know how I would do that kind of instructively, and
Hmm.
I never been a teacher of writing before,
Hmm.
um, and that's one thing that was a huge relief, was just that right away, my very first prompt that I gave them, they saw the opportunity and they
Yeah.
took that space and really ran with it and dove deep,
Hmm.
and didn't just describe, kind of the wave tops of that first prompt. So that was a good sign that we were heading in the right direction.
Well, because I think what we're really doing is not teaching them writing, or we're just giving them a safe space to be heard. And that's the most important part for sure. It's funny. I started out that way too, thinking, oh my gosh, I wanted to be very loose and everything because everything's so regimented. But after a couple of weeks of my first group, I realized um, how they did want some kind of structure around the thing. So we made a set of rules around how we were going to be in our class. And the first thing we did was we had this little mantra. And so we'd all say it together at the very beginning, and it would be, um, we are readers, we are intelligent, we
Mm,
have something worthy to say. And we'd all say it together.
great.
It was fascinating how I thought, wow, I mean, people saying something in unison, I think would be the last thing they would want to do. But it was so interesting. You just don't know.
I love that.
You don't know what to expect.
No,
I have something else I wanted to ask you about, and this was a part of the book that I found, a little dark and very interesting, because I know nothing about military service, or and you started out at it really in law enforcement. That was your intent or your inclination from the time you were a late teenager. And
yeah.
then when you were in the service, you trained as a military police, and you
Mhm.
were actually at Gitmo for a while, which you describe as a brutal and savage place. Um, and then there's this guy in your class, the one that you call Chet,
Yeah.
and he's a nice guy, but a big guy who could do some damage if he so wanted to. And you were looking at him one day, and and you're thinking, there's another side. There's always another side.
Mm.
And I think when you're inside a prison, you're always thinking, we're not, nobody is one thing. We're not the worst thing we've ever done. We're not the best thing we've ever done.
Mm.
But there's this. You said when you were young and just starting out in this career, that you had a very regimented idea of right and wrong. And I think in general in society, we have that idea that inmates are bad, soldiers are good.
Mhm.
All inmates are bad, all soldiers are good. And you're looking at this guy, Chet, and you're thinking of some soldiers you've known and some things in your own career. I found that really moving and gutsy, and
Mhm.
also enlightening. So I wondered if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, there's so many thoughts that would race around my mind, especially when I would spend time with Chet, and I really love that people get to read about him. Um, and yeah, and just to think about our as a service member, the conflicts that we've had, during my generation, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the work that I did in Gitmo, down at Guantanamo Bay. You know, some people in other parts of the world would consider those wars and the detainment of hundreds of people on an island in the Caribbean to be illegal.
Hmm.
And if they had their way, certain people from our government and maybe even U.S. service members would be held accountable in their version of of courts. And that's that's reality. And um, that's something that I think I've come to terms with, a little later in life. 19, 22-year-old Craig wouldn't have really been interested in
Hmm.
that reality. And I think that regimented kind of idea of right and wrong and law and order it's time that we actually have, I think, just as people and as a country, a real kind of conversation with ourselves about what that actually looks like, because the lines are very thin, and the gray area is very big. You know, and it was easier to think the way that I used to. And at the end of the day, as a person and as a Marine, we've never been about doing things the easy way, physically or mentally. We always take the highest standard and strive to understand and the most and be the best, right? And so the older I've gotten, the Marine in me is now more interested in holding myself to a higher mental standard, and how I conduct myself and how I write and how I communicate. You know, and so when I look at a guy like Chet, you know, I see a whole person, you know, that's made their mistakes, that is capable of violence, and you know, you know, but then I instantly think about, yeah, the things that I did overseas and the things that my fellow Marines and I did, you know, in the name of war, you know, in the name of service, that, you know, if we had been born in a different country, we would see completely differently. So it's, you know, it's just perspective, I think, to kind of sum it up. You know, and it's not it's not it's not political, it's not unpatriotic, it's important, and it's difficult, right? But it's, you know, that's the whole idea. It should be difficult. When things are complicated, or when things are too simplistic, that's when we should start looking around and be like, wait a minute, you know, are we taking the easy road here?
Yeah. Well, there's another couple of lines that I found the writing really moving, Craig. But there's one, you say it had been more than 15 years since I'd first left home to start my career in the military. I had joined as a fresh-faced 19-year-old with an unflinching view of right and wrong. Before long, my experience in the Marines helped me realize through firsthand experience that the world of crime and punishment isn't clear-cut and transparent. It's muddy and inconsistent. And I think that same sentiment can be absolutely applied to the inside of a prison. You know, it's not clear, you know, what's a mistake and what's a complete failure of humanity. It gets very muddy, and it's human, you know, it's human.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if people come away with one kind of thing from second chances, and hopefully from hearing us talk about, like, you know, there was a moment when we were both talking, and I was like, we're like, you have to almost remind yourself that you're these are people in prison, you know, even when you're in there, you have to kind of remind yourself that you're in prison. And I think if there's one thing people can kind of hopefully come away with, from second chances, is that prison is enough. Like it's in a lot of cases more than enough punishment. We don't need to continue to punish people who have served their time.
Yeah. Oh, I could not agree more.
You know,
could not agree more.
Put up walls in front of them, and then we wonder why the recidivism rate is so high. You know, and when you walk in and you actually spend time with people in there, you see that very quickly.
Yes, you certainly do.
Yeah.
There's some questions in here that are kind of interesting. Well, somebody wants to know how LJ is doing.
Oh, great question.
That's one of the puppies who's not a puppy anymore.
Yeah, he's doing great. We haven't seen him in a little while, but we're gonna now that you know, we can kind of relax. Everybody's can get outside and stuff. We're gonna get together with LJ soon. Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody wants to know, this is an interesting. Oh, this is from my husband. Hi Dan. How did the staff and guards seem to view what you were doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would like to think staff, like, everybody was always very, very nice and
Mhm.
very excited to see Fred, that's
Yeah.
I could be on fire and people would be like, "Hey, Fred," and so that's, I think, I never got any attitude. I never got any kind of hostility from any staff, or any of the guards. They might have had some of them might have been like me when I was young, and I would see the prisoners in the brigs I worked in, going to counseling or getting, something around the holidays or something like that. I might have rolled my eyes. I did roll my eyes back then. So there might be an element of that at Maine State that I'm just blissfully unaware of, because at the end of the day, I was just happy to be going up there and just to do what I do.
One of the,
Mom,
go
I was just
ahead.
going to jump in here for just a
Oh,
second.
hi, Gibson.
Hey, there was a few questions that came in over email, so I thought I would throw those
Oh,
in there.
okay.
Candace from Bath wrote, I'm wondering if you can speak to how much this program exists in other states or in other prisons. Is there a national org through which this enlightened program could spread?
I assume she means the puppy program.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, America's Vet Dogs has them in, like at least a dozen prisons up and down the East Coast, all the way from Maine to Florida. I think they have a program. So they're just with them, and that's one nonprofit. So that can speak, firsthand of. But I remember way back. This was way back in 2003 when I was training to be a military police officer in Texas. We got a tour of a state facility in Texas, and I remember seeing inmates with puppies there and being like, "Whoa, that's wild." And that's way back then. So I'm very confident that it is kind of a thing that's taken hold in a lot of facilities all over the country. But I think the degrees to which the training, maybe is different. There's a lot of foster programs, and there's one of those at Maine State too, where the men essentially just take in foster puppies and give them, leash training and crate training and some obedience stuff and make them more adoptable, which is great too. I love that.
Great. And then Babby wrote, this book felt especially open and personal. And I want to ask if your time and involvement with the men at Maine State have made it even easier to speak so authentically about your own struggles and accomplishments because they were so willing to participate honestly and openly in the group.
Yeah, that's a great question, Babby. Thank you. I mean, absolutely. I think it was a similar kind of lesson that I have from Fred, where the first moments I spent with Fred in Afghanistan, he was, this hot, hungry, neglected, street dog that had no reason to wag his tail, but he did anyway, and later on in life when I came home and I felt angry and I felt, like I had reasons to be frustrated and negative, I would look at Fred and be like, well, he wagged his tail when he was a dog that was hot and hungry and neglected. And like, if he can do that, what's my excuse? And so when these men started to like open their souls and bear their feelings in such an authentic and open way, I thought to myself, are you kidding me? Like, these guys in prison, who are supposed to be, the worst of the worst, of our society are capable of that kind of growth and that kind of vulnerability. And, I have to, do my part too. And I have to meet them in the middle and show them that I respect that. And the best way to do that is to give that, right back and open yourself up. So yeah, that's a great question, Babby. Thank you.
In the book, you talk about not wanting to do that at first, not because you didn't want to, but that it wasn't your show, that you wanted it to be
Right.
all about them. And it sounds like you didn't go through a volunteer training program, that you just sort of got just sashayed in there. I did go through a volunteer program, and one of the things they tell you over and over again is not to share anything. Don't share no personal anything. And it is impossible to
Mhm.
do that if you're in a writing class, and you just you can't not share something of yourself.
Right.
And in some ways, it's not fair to ask them to do something you're not willing to do.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't go to a, a volunteer uh, anything like that, but I think I had the benefit of the doubt because of my past working in prisons and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it really was. It was. I feel like anybody in that room would have responded similarly, because that's what's so great about being vulnerable with each other and with yourself, is it really encourages people to do the same, and you very quickly start to realize that we don't have that much that separates us as people,
Yeah.
and we need more of that in our culture. Just we need to more reminders of the similarities and the power of vulnerability. And I think especially as men, it is kind of um, you know beaten into our heads, sometimes literally, to that vulnerability is weakness, and it means you're compromised, and in some very rare circumstances, that's true. A battlefield, is one of them. An intelligence operation, and speaking from my experience, like that's that's true. But you really are selling yourself short and doing a lot of damage to yourself if you don't eventually work your way around to the other end of it, and really find your way and your path to opening up and being vulnerable. It's just so important.
Well, you talk in the book about, how you were trained as an MP and the quote, fear up style of interrogation, which is basically just to scare the bejesus out of your
Yeah.
person till they tell you what you need to know,
Mhm.
and how you slowly kind of came around to the idea of building a relationship with somebody as a way of getting equal or better information.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's thank you. It's all tactics, and of generating fear in someone in an interrogation situation can be useful. It doesn't have to be, loud. It can just be like, hey, this is the situation you're in, man, this is what will happen if this doesn't happen, that kind of thing. And it's all kind of just a process to kind of get them to see you as a gateway to something better, to improving their situation. Uh,
Mhm.
but it is manipulative, of course. And when you do obtain information based on fear, you do have to kind of, when you write your report afterwards, you have to indicate that, because it does affect the veracity of that information. Versus if it is, I had, a great relationship with this person, and they, we connected via this approach that was about their family, and I talked about my family, and they talked about their family, and we connected
Mhm.
over that. And the next thing I know, he's telling me where the Taliban have hid a bunch of IEDs because he doesn't want his kids to step on them, you know and so that's a much more um complete kind of product that you end up coming away with. And it's the lesson there is just the the manipulation behind fear, and how powerful it is, but how ultimately it is just manipulation. When you start to just try to invoke fear in people, you get
Yeah.
what you get.
This is it's kind of related in a way, but you speak very warmly and movingly of the warden at Maine State.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved the chapter when you're talking about finding out about his background, and he had a very rough go as a kid. He visited his own father in that very prison. It probably wasn't in Warren at the time; it was probably in Thomaston.
Mhm.
Um, but and then within 2 years, he had all these, like a garden program and all of these things. And it really struck me is how different corrections can be if you begin from a place of empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And he's a great example of, I think, the point I was trying to grab at earlier, just talking about fear. Is somebody in a position like a warden is in a position to imprison people and keep them afraid,
Mhm.
and keep them, walled up mentally and physically. And he took the opposite approach. You think about that. Not a lot of people might not remember him, but he was in the news a lot back in a couple years ago. That sheriff out in Arizona.
Oh, yeah,
I-
Arpaio or
He's
something.
the
Yes.
exact opposite of a Randy Liberty, right? I mean,
Mhm.
he humiliated. He had chain gangs. He just broke people down who were already in prison. And it's like we said earlier, like prison is enough. Just the whole concept of imprisoning someone and taking them away from their family and their community and humiliating them by separating them from the rest of society, that is adequate. And Randy saw it and sees in these men and in these people a way forward for all of them. And the very first thing that he tries to restore in them is their sense of self-worth. And that is exactly that. The way he does that is through what you're saying, is through kindness.
Kindness, yeah. It was really an amazing thing to see. One of the things I wanted to share with you before is we in two of the classes I did, not all of them, they weren't willing, but the two classes that were willing, we did a public reading within the inside, so they have town meeting every Wednesday, and that means everybody has to be there. It's in the day room, and at the time it was I think it was 88 women, and I think it's more now. It's probably I think it's going to be a very different place when I go back because it's more crowded. But anyway, they all came, and I had, I think, 5 of my students agreed to read something, and one was that Wild Kingdom thing, which brought the house down. But the thing that I found so wonderful about it, some were reading poetry, some read a little bit of a short story, and some of them were very funny. And I saw the COs that were there,
Mm.
surrounding us, looking at the women. I mean, like really looking at them as writers and performers and entertainers, and they were laughing. And to
Great.
me, that was one of the most powerful moments of my whole time there, was seeing them being seen
Mm.
by people who are trained not to really see them.
Right.
So that was kind of an amazing moment.
Really great. I love that. Yeah, that's for them. That's really empowering. And that they. I think what's really great about writing programs, and it sounds like yours is a really great example of this, is that in a prison, they do have a lot of kind of prescribed programs. Things
Yes.
come with workbooks and videos and questionnaires and stuff that they have to do. Some of it's as a result of their crimes, and some of it's as a
Right.
result of whatever program they're in. And I think that it kind of shuts people down. I mean, we can all remember getting a PowerPoint slide in school, and just being like your eyes kind of glaze over, and I think that not to say that stuff isn't important for them to do, to kind of check those boxes, but the real impact and the real kind of growth comes in things like what you did, and giving them something that is truly theirs. And
Mhm.
it's so rare for a lot of us in life, but even more rare in a prison.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love the way you say that, because even just keeping your physical items in prison is difficult.
Right.
And to have something that precious, like something that's yours, what you're reading, what you're writing, that's even more important than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's um we I had my group yesterday, with the guys, and we're doing a similar thing now, where we're reading a book, because it's just easier with Zoom to work our way through a book, and so we're reading a book called Humankind, which is really great. Um, but we're also just having different topics every week that are kind of just based on what we talked about from week to week.
Mhm.
And the reason I bring it up is because this week we talked about the week before, we talked about the idea of of a black swan event, which is a kind of a negative event, like a hurricane or an earthquake or something like that. And then a white swan event, which is a good thing. And so, we were talking about, just the different kind of ideas of those. And I said, let's think about a white swan that was in a black swan, and so that was what we talked about this week. And it was just really neat to see one guy in particular, and where he went with that was as a he talked about being a parent. And he's like, well, I guess I coming to prison hasn't been great, but it's made me really connect actually more with my daughter than I would have if I was on the street. And it's made me really see the value in being a father. And so that's just, again, just another example of something that they come to on their own, that they didn't find that in a workbook or in a slideshow, and that's such a great thing that we're able to do. It's really cool.
I love it. I see Fred there, and I realize that this book doesn't have Fred's origin story in it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there may be people on this call somewhere who don't know Fred's origin story. And I wondered, I know you love to tell it, and I would love to hear it.
Yeah.
So how did Fred end up on your couch there?
That's a great question. Yeah, of course. So, I found him in October of 2010 in a really remote, really hostile part of Afghanistan. The Taliban really had a stronghold in this area called Sangin, where Fred's from, and they had shut down schools and the mined all the roads, and really just had made things very difficult for the people that lived there. And so we were sent in to provide security, and eventually the end of the road was the idea was to improve a dam in the area to bring power to the valley, because they had a lot of resources there, and that's one of the reasons the Taliban was so wanted it so bad. And before we get inserted into that area, we get briefed about it from the people in the intelligence world, and nothing we heard was exciting. Nothing we heard was good. It was all bad. The Taliban have massive numbers. It's going to be crazy. And we insert out of helicopters. There's no base for us to go to. We had to kind of commandeer a house and make our own base, before the sun came up. And we spent over a week just under constant siege by the Taliban. And in the middle of that fighting, I saw this funny little dog, and even just looking at him would make us all kind of laugh, and it would be in a quick moment between defending ourselves that, you just see him and you would smile. And after things calmed down, I couldn't resist. I had to walk over and check him out. And that's when, he wagged his tail when he had nothing to wag his tail about. And it's literally been this incredible adventure ever since. He went on a helicopter ride before he ever went on a car ride, and getting him home was challenging, but at the end of the day, it's I'm so lucky that I didn't get caught. And that
I was going to say, you skipped the duffel bag part of all this.
If people, I love now that you don't have to have read Craig and Fred to appreciate second chances, but I of course encourage people to do so, because you'll just be all the more kind of enamored with this dog and the journey that he's been on. And it's really amazing that I found him where I did at this very dark, very dangerous, very scary place. And he literally led me into another kind of dark, dangerous, or at least as we associate it as a culture, kind of scary place. And so he really is just this little ball of light that I just hold the leash, and he does the rest.
I know, it makes me want to just cry to think of what he has done for you. And I mean, you're the rescued one.
That's absolutely right.
Just beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
This is a beautiful conversation, you two, and it's great to hear two of you who've spent so much time working in prisons talk to each other is really, really.
I really appreciate it, Craig, because I have really not talked to anybody about it, really.
Yeah,
I
it's
just haven't.
right. It's I hope that, you know, once things are, you know, are opened up a little more, people will be encouraged to to volunteer their time, and whether it's a writing class or gardening or, you know, whatever you have to offer, you know, because it's just, it's so valuable for them and for you, you know, for them
Mhm.
to just connect with people from the outside. It really goes a long way.
It's so important. It really is. And, um, you know, you don't know what exactly you will, whatever you have to give, you don't know how it's going to be paid forward. You know, then there's no way to know, but it's so important to put things like that inside the prisons, because most of these people are going to get out at some point, you know,
That's right.
some sooner than later, but most of them are going out, and to have them leave with something in their soul that they didn't have before is it cannot be a bad thing.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Craig, or I think we're just about out of time. I
Oh
don't
my
know.
gosh, this flew.
Yeah, it did.
About
Um,
hours.
yeah, if Mon, if there's one more question you wanted to sneak in, or Craig, there's anything you wanted to say, I don't know where you guys would like to go.
I'll leave it with Monica if she has anything or wants to share or ask. Yeah.
I just want to say once more, Craig, I hope maybe we can meet somewhere, you know,
Yeah.
for real, since you do live in Maine. But I just have really, I feel very humbled, and I don't know what the word is, but just being able to talk to you about our shared experiences has been very, very lovely. And your both books are beautiful, but this one especially, I saw you grow as a writer in this book, for one thing. You know, the act. Here's the book, by the way, everybody. Look at those two cover boys. How cute. Um, and it was really just a lovely, beautifully written book. So thank you.
Coming from you, that means so much. So thank
Oh,
you. And I would love, yeah, I'd love to. You can meet Fred in person, and we could you know, definitely get together sometime and talk more about this. And you know, and to everybody from Longfellow and Maine writers and publishers, thank you guys for having us, and for so many people that joined in to just learn a little bit more about this process. Thank you. Um, and yeah, it's been a really great night. Oh, let me wake somebody up. So
yes, I was gonna. I thought you'd never ask. Hey, Fred. Doggy.
Good
Hi,
boy.
sweetie.
He had a big. We were outside all day. He's chasing.
Oh,
Nice.
monkeys.
oh, he's just adorable. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Good
Oh,
boy.
that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
This was so much fun, and you know, I'm really proud of the book, and I'm really proud of the responses that you know, it's already getting are incredible, and it says to me, it gives me a lot of hope for us as people and as a country, you know, that we can you know, read something like this about prison and really come away you know, with a good feeling, you know.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Absolutely. And just a reminder for folks to go to Longfellow and
Yeah.
buy a copy. And Greg, you're going to be signing books at Longfellow, right, too? So if folks want to indicate in their order, I think they can do that and to get a signed book.
And Fred we have a Paul print stamp that so Fred of course is more important. Yeah, it's actually made of his little paw print, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks you both. This was wonderful. And
thank you both. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Bye. Thanks,
Take
Gibson.
care, everybody. Thanks everybody
Thanks,
for being here.
Lucinda.
Thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye, Craig. Bye, Fred.
Bye. Thank you.